So, a little introduction on Peer Up for those who haven't been here. Peer Up is a student-led initiative that connects students with alumni and professionals for meaningful discussions that address real high school experiences and challenges. And so today, before we start, a couple of guidelines to ensure a smooth session. Please stay on mute and keep your video off to minimize distractions. Maintain respectful communication in the chat, and questions are encouraged in the chat box at any time. And if you want to review the session afterwards, it will be recorded and shared on YouTube. And so I want to introduce today's speaker, Gauri Gupta. Gauri is a sophomore at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, originally from Seattle, Washington. She plans to study finance and operations management with the minor in consumer psychology. And on campus, she's involved with Wharton Woman, serves as a teaching assistant for a Wharton communication course, and works as a campus tour guide. She's interested in social justice, sustainability, and impact-focused finance, and she's excited to keep exploring how finance can be used to create long-term change. Outside of school, she enjoys going to the gym, long walks, meditation, and traveling. And today, Gauri is going to talk about how you don't need permission to make change. And you'll learn today how one student transformed injustice into action and how you can use your voice to make an impact at school and beyond. And I'll hand it off to Gauri now.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here today. So for the next hour or so, I really want to talk about my interest in social justice and advocacy work and how that began and how it shaped what I care about now and what I do as a college student. So I am going to be talking about a pretty difficult incident that did drive me towards this passion. So before we begin, I would like each of you to take a moment and share in the chat a cause or something that you would be eager to advocate for, whether that's something you are currently advocating for or something that you would like to. In the chat, maybe talk about what is one change that you would like to see in the world. I hope that over the next hour, as I share my experience, you are able to learn more about how you can begin advocating for a change that you feel passionately about. So, what sparked my advocacy was back during my sophomore year of high school, I was a part of my school fall play. And unfortunately, a few days before opening night during dress rehearsals, one of my castmates shared that she was sexually assaulted by another castmate backstage. And this was the first time that I ever encountered this sort of issue, let alone someone as close to me as my castmate or my friend. So of course, myself as well as the entire cast included was very shocked and we just didn't know how to react during that moment. So after a few days after this incident, we decided as a collective cast to go to the school administration, and seek action and accountability to support our friend as well as action against the perpetrator. However, we expected clear communication and clear accountability, and unfortunately, days and then weeks and then months even passed by without any sort of clear or concrete response by the admin. And this lack of communication was very surprising because I assumed that schools as institutions were designed to support students anytime they go through issues of assault or mental health or any other academic or personal issues. So this silence really raised questions about how student concerns are actually handled within the school level. So after this experience, I started having personal conversations with my friends and my classmates to hear more about what they think about this issue, as well as the silence that ensued by the school. And many of them surprisingly shared that they've gone through similar experiences, but they chose to never report it to the school because they were afraid that the school would simply dismiss their concerns, or, there's so much stigma surrounding these types of issues. So these conversations that I've had personally made me realize how prevalent and widespread, these issues are that students are going through, but they don't have a concrete platform to seek that additional help. So it became very clear to me that students across all different grade levels needed a more safer and accessible way to find support without feeling uncomfortable or feeling that the stigma will drive away that support. So, in response, a few months after the initial incident, our entire cast helped to organize a school protest outside of our high school. And it was really empowering because there was lots of student participation as approximately 1,500 students chose to participate during school hours. And it was really nice because, not only was there so much collective action, but also so many students decide to come up to the front, share their experiences, sh voice their opinions over what the school should do. So it's really empowering to see how many students were on the same page and how powerful this collective action was. But again, it also reinforced the idea of how common silence can be often as a response anytime students may be going through this. So, after the protest occurred and after having these conversations with my students and fellow peers, I want to do something more concrete to support survivors of these crimes, and have a more concrete support system that they can rely on. So, after a few months of brainstorming, ideation, test trying, me and my friend eventually created an app called Safe Space, which was designed as a discrete app that student survivors could use to access confidential resources, document abuse, connect with various support organizations, talk to a professional, etc. And what was really unique about Safe Space was that it was designed as it used a gaming style interface. So when you first logged onto the app, you won't reach the actual homepage, but rather you would reach a game, a space game, hence the name Safe Space, so that when anyone first logs onto the app, they aren't suspicious about the app's true intentions, and then the user can then access all the confidential resources more safely without being fearful that someone's tracking their online activity or suspicious about the app's true intentions. And the reason we included this privacy mechanism was that a lot of the times when I was having conversations with a lot of peers, they mentioned that even though they would like to seek help, they are afraid to do so because, again, of the stigma associated with it. They don't want other people to know what they're doing online, etc. And then once we design Safe Space, we want to reach out to various advocacy organizations, first on the local level, just so we can get some credibility with Safe Space, reach out to more individuals who would benefit from this app, etc. So we began by contacting various organizations through cold email, cold phone calls. We even went to some of them in person. But unfortunately, a lot of them were unable to partner with us due to the limited resources and funding on their behalf. And also, of course, lots of them were kind of hesitant and cautious to extend partnership with two teenagers. Understandably so, they were afraid that it would just add extra liability and extra work for them. So a lot of them just chose not to partner with us, even though a lot of them did like the idea of youth-based advocacy and safe space as a support system. But eventually, through lots of just reaching out, cold emailing, eventually months went by, and then LifeWire, which is a Seattle-based domestic violence support organization, believed in our cause, believed in our passion, and decided to support us. So through my partnership with LifeWire, we were able to then create educational content with them, create hosted discussions on consent, survivor support, etc. And through our collaboration, we were able to share a safe space to a much larger audience, and through their backing, we were able to gain greater credibility. And it really helped to establish Safe Space as a trusted resource that survivors and youth across all different ages can use and share with their friends and peers as well. So as our project began expanding over the next couple of months, we started receiving more grants from local organizations such as Confronting Domestic Violence, the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, etc. So these funds were really crucial and critical in helping us to bring safe space even in the school level as well. So we started hosting different workshops, not only within my health classroom in my high school, but also in various other middle and high schools across the school district. So we were able to lead these school-wide lessons on consent, available resources, how to best support your friends, survivors, etc. And of course, throughout these workshops, there were some peers who were very engaged and, really were aligned with the topic that we were talking about. And of course, naturally, there were some students who were dismissive, who were making jokes, who weren't really taking our work very seriously. But these experiences just really reinforce the importance of maintaining patience and consistency and not letting these small setbacks really deter you from your main goal. And then eventually, through this consistent trial and error, through expanding into health classrooms, gaining greater partnerships as well as funding, eventually, 2 years later, during the end of my junior year, I was then invited to lead a workshop on gender-based violence as a part of a larger conference hosted by the United Nations in Washington, D.C. So it was a really powerful experience because I was able to deliver a similar talk as I am right now to a forum as large as the United Nations, which is something that I never expected I would ever reach when I began my advocacy work back in my sophomore year. And it really showed me how important, the local work I was doing by partnering with local organizations, how that can eventually lead to larger conversations and bigger opportunities where I'm able to share my work at a larger platform, which was just such an empowering and powerful experience for me. And now flash forward to right now, I'm currently a sophomore at college, studying finance. And it's just really interesting to see, the connections between what I did in my high school experience with advocacy and how that's connecting to what I'm studying currently at finance, because I really do see a strong connection between advocacy and my academic interests. Because, finance does play a major role in determining which ideas receive support and resources and which community gets these support. So my advocacy work helped me understand where some of these systems may fall short, and studying finance kind of gives me a more practical toolkit to think about how resources can be used more thoughtfully and responsibly to support underserved communities. And throughout this advocacy journey, I've also developed skills that continue to matter in different parts of my life and have really helped me a lot as a college student. For instance, having clear communication has been really important, not only in my school, but also my professional experiences, my club experiences, my social ones as well. And it's also really important to continuously listen carefully, know how to navigate difficult conversations across individuals, across different stakeholders. And it's also really important that I've learned is to stay calm under pressure, which are skills that I've learned through my advocacy, academic, and professional work as well. So before I end kind of my main talk of this session, I want to close with one main takeaway. As I've learned as a student advocate, you don't need to have everything figured out to speak up because like I began advocating, creating safe space right when I noticed that my school wasn't supporting my friend and my castmate in a way that I thought would be most beneficial. So really for anyone interested in, advocating for cause that they may feel passionate about, but they don't know where to begin, it's really important to just pay attention to what may feel wrong, as that's often the first and crucial important step, because small actions can really compound into meaningful change over time. And your voice matters so much more earlier, and it matters so much more than you may expect. So thank you guys so much for listening, and now I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you so much, Gary, for sharing your experiences. This really shows us what it means to stand up for something that you truly believe in. So now, as you said, we're going to move into a few questions about like advocacy and the impact that you've been able to create. The first few questions are about finding the courage to act and getting started in the first place. So the first, I know you mentioned talking to others who have had similar experiences in the beginning. So when the school didn't take action, what was the very first concrete step that you took after realizing that you had to speak up about it?
Yes, so the first real step I took was, at the moment it was very overwhelming because, of course, I had to support my friend, but also we had our play in a few days. Our entire cast really wanted to support our friend, but we just didn't know really the first step to take. So I think what was really important was that I first slowed down and I tried to really make sense and understand with what was actually happening around me. As you mentioned, I began talking to people I trusted and students and my classmates, and I asked very open questions like how they were feeling or whether they had ever experienced something similar. And, through these conversations I was having, and by starting very small and starting with people that I felt comfortable with, this helped me realize that this wasn't just about one incident or one response from the school, but it really was about a pattern of students not feeling heard or supported within the resources that they were provided. So, I feel like for a lot of individuals who are thinking about, starting some sort of change within their community, the first step doesn't have to be very public or loud because, as I mentioned, we did do a protest, but that wasn't until a few months afterwards. So my first very concrete step was really just about, paying attention to student opinions and voices around me and asking questions and realizing that, something that you're noticing is off, that it does matter, and kind of, having these conversations very early on by people that you do trust and you feel comfortable doing so.
Thank you. Thank you, Gauri. For the next question, it's kind of going to be about like how speaking up can be scary and how a lot of students are afraid to challenge authority, especially adults. And how did you push past that fear and those what ifs that are like sort of associated with the stigma? And
So
when did you first decide to act?
yes, so fear was definitely a large part of the process for me. Because at the moment I was a sophomore, I was still very young, and I was, of course, worried about getting in trouble by the school, being misunderstood, or, having some other academic consequence because of course, my entire life I've been told to kind of obey authorities, listen to the school and kind of blindly assume that what they're doing is the right thing. So kind of being a bit defiant in this sense was a bit intimidating, and I didn't really know what the potential consequences would be like. So what really helped me was reframing the situation because you know, when I was, building safe space and protesting and connecting with different organizations such as LifeWire, and I became more involved with my advocacy work, I realized that not speaking up had also had consequences, if not worse than just staying silent. So, as I was initially very fearful over what could the potential consequences be, I really focused on what felt like to be the most responsible decision at the moment rather than what felt safe, as a lot of us may often resort to. And it's really important for students to think about it, remember that courage doesn't always mean not being scared because a lot of the times I was very scared, but it really just means, deciding that something matters more and something matters more than your initial fear to take that small step anyways. Because you have to reframe the situation and understand that, being silent and being passive is a lot more detrimental than, being fearful just for a little bit to make that initial step and change. So for me, I think it was just really important to reframe my situation, connect with adult authorities and students that I felt comfortable with, and, being comfortable with that initial discomfort as well.
Thank you. So the next few questions are more about navigating resistance and setbacks. So schools and districts a lot of times focus on protecting themselves. So why do you think institutions like these resist taking action even when something serious has happened?
I think institutions move very slowly, like because they're focused, of course, on protecting themselves. Because if you look at a school, and this incident's going to be exposed to the public, they may be worried about their reputation. They may be worried that students and parents may feel unsafe, may have greater questions about how the school is handling these sorts of incidents and experiences. There's so many different issues where students may be concerned about different rules and liabilities more than individual experiences. Um, and lots of institutions may resist taking actions because not necessarily because they believe that students are wrong or maybe over exaggerating, but because a lot of these schools, from the experiences I've had, they aren't always designed to respond very quickly or empathetically to student concerns because oftentimes they have such a strict and heavy bureaucracy. And anytime a student reports any incident like this, they have to go through so many different levels. There's a huge investigation that has to occur. And oftentimes it just takes too long so that students at that point they just feel like it doesn't make sense to go to a school because there's so many limited resources. There's such a heavy bureaucracy and it just takes so much time. So I feel like understanding this helped me realize that, the resistance from schools that I received doesn't mean that I'm necessarily in the wrong, but it just often means that these systems aren't really designed to handle these difficult conversations. So through understanding this, it made me realize that I maybe had to turn to other organizations or other support systems to get the change I wanted. I'm not necessarily the schools. So that's why I decided to reach out to different advocacy organizations and other nonprofits who may be better equipped with the resources that can then support students later on.
Yeah, you talked about how you sort of like improved over your advocacy journey and how you realized things about the education system. What were some specific mistakes that you made that you would have just avoided if you could?
Looking back, I think one mistake I made earlier on was kind of thinking I had to do everything by myself. I feel like in the beginning, I was very close friends with the victim who was assaulted, and then I also helped to lead a lot of the initial conversations with the school administration. I helped to organize a lot of the parts of the protest. I built safe space, etc. So it felt like because I was already taking all this action, that I had to continue doing everything by myself and kind of being the voice for my castmates, the entire cast, the school, etc. So I did feel a lot of pressure initially to respond to everyone and fix everything very quickly. And kind of, when I started something, I kind of expected immediate response either from the school, LifeWire, or the other organizations, etc. But over time, as Safe Space expanded and I became more seriously involved in this work, I learned the importance of asking for help and setting important boundaries for myself. I also took some more time to listen more carefully and intentionally before immediately acting and jumping for change. Because I've learned that advocacy isn't necessarily about having the perfect answer for every issue, but it's really just about learning as you go and adjusting and adapting when something doesn't work, and really relying on the individuals and your peers and mentors around you to also help you because they may have other experiences or perspectives that you may have not considered before. So it's really important to expand kind of your thought process and rely on them as well, rather than taking on the burden of everything by yourself.
Thank you. So I know you mentioned about connecting with nonprofits and eventually like a lot of local organizations. So how did you go from advocating within your own school to working with nonprofits and eventually speaking on much larger platforms?
Definitely. So I feel like this growth happened a lot more organically than I anticipated. As I mentioned, I started off very small with local conversations, local protests, organizations, etc. But the way I was able to really expand was I really focused more on consistency rather than initially reaching that scale early on. So I really took my advocacy one step at a time. I really worked on one thing at a time, whether that was having conversations, building safe space, hosting workshops, etc. And I really tried to do all these small steps very thoughtfully and intentionally. So as my work became more established by receiving credibility and support from organizations like LifeWire, Girl Up, Confronting Domestic Violence, etc. People even outside my school district started paying more attention and started also becoming interested. And then through that, they also reached out to me and were interested in learning more and helping us, etc. So I guess the main takeaway is that it's really helpful to know that you don't need a massive platform to begin, or you don't need a long, 5-year plan or goal to begin. And I feel like impact really does grow whenever your work is very grounded and connected to real needs that you've observed around you. And it's just really important to take it one step at a time and not to overwhelm yourself because oftentimes it starts off very slow, but then once you're able to build those meaningful connections, share your passions with those who are very important to you, then that growth is able to, grow and expand in a much more organic way rather than you forcing it in any shape or form.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting sort of the issue of like how people can't really start big and how you have to try to get big through hard work. And when it comes to that, many students, like you said, don't have like that type of networking or the experience. And so, how does a high schooler, like, how did you, for example, reach out to nonprofits and how did you sort of get them involved with your cause?
It was definitely very challenging at first because, again, I was a sophomore. I didn't really have much prior experience or background or any connections, for that matter. So I really just began by, simple Google searches. I looked at local organizations and advocacy groups that kind of do the similar work that I was interested in advocating for. I just started off with just cold emailing, cold calling, just so many of them every single day, at least 20, 30 of them every single day. Even for some of them who were more nearby where I live, I would even go to them in person, kind of share my background, my interests, and potential rooms for partnerships or collaborations. And it did take a lot of time for me to actually get positive responses because for the first bit, a lot of them, most of them wouldn't even respond, but then those who did respond would say that, either they don't have the bandwidth or the resources to support our project, or that, they just don't feel comfortable partnering with teenagers on an issue so hefty. So I guess really the key is just being consistent, being very honest and very respectful of the time and of the limitations that these organizations may have. So the way I approached a lot of my cold outreaching was just to introduce myself, kind of explain why I care about this issue, asking a clear question, and really just showing that I'm very interested and invested in the work that the organization does. And many people they won't respond, and that's very normal. And what really does matter is persistency and learning from each attempt. And even though some organizations may say no initially, that doesn't mean like it's a complete no for them forever. Lots of the times I would circle back to a lot of the organizations that initially didn't want to support us. And then they became more interested. They kind of had other organizations I could connect with. So it's just really important to continue building and growing your network. And you really just need one yes to help you grow. So one thoughtful response that I received from LifeWire really did lead to such meaningful support and guidance. And it's just really important to realize that this is all just a natural part of the process and to not be discouraged, even when you do get a lot of no's, but to just continuously be consistent, have your initial goal in mind so you don't feel discouraged. And eventually, the right organizations will reach your network and will be willing to support you.
Thank you. I think it's really important to know that even just cold calling consistently can eventually make a really big impact. And also a reminder for the participants, questions are really encouraged in the chat and we will answer them at the end. So going on to our next topic, it's more about having balance and well-being, and staying human. So you've dealt with a heavy and emotional topic, and how do you protect your own mental well-being while continuing to show up for others?
I feel like even though I've been working, and advocating for such a serious cause, and I feel like I really have to, be attentive of everyone's needs and like, do the best work I can. I've had to remind myself that I'm allowed to, be human first. I still am a high school student at the end of the day, and I don't need to carry every problem all at once. So I guess anytime I would feel overwhelmed or pressured or stressed, I would, take breaks. I would talk things through either with my family or my friends or my mentors, etc. And really stepping back when I feel like that really needed, when that was very necessary for me to stay present long term. And I feel like a really important lesson I've learned is that, caring about others and advocacy doesn't necessarily mean sacrificing your own well-being at the expense of supporting others. Because I've learned that you can't show up for others if you aren't showing up for yourself as well. So it's just really important to take care of yourself throughout the entire process as it makes it more easier for you to support others and also more excited and encouraged to do so. Because if your mental health is also deteriorating, then you won't be able to show up for others the way in which they would need you to show up for. So it was just really important for me to be more willing to go easy on myself and take breaks. Whether that's through some of the healthy habits I practice, such as, meditation, taking some moments of mindfulness and silence, because I feel like those practices have really helped to recenter my thoughts and be more, gentle with myself and realizing that I also need breaks as a student to show up and do my best work as well.
Thank you, Gauri. You definitely mentioned trying to take care of yourself, and so I was gonna ask, how do any like simple habits you have help you reset when you're feeling intense?
So, as I mentioned, I feel like meditation has been very helpful for me. So I've been meditating ever since I was in kindergarten, but I've started more seriously incorporating it as a daily habit. I try to meditate at least 20 to 30 minutes every morning right when I wake up so that I'm able to start my day with more calmness and more positive intentions that I'm able to carry with me throughout the entire day. And then I also like to meditate 20 to 30 minutes right before I go to bed every night, just so I'm able to, reflect on what happened throughout the day and calm myself down before I'm able to sleep and rest even further. And I feel like these habits have been very important for me because I've been able to calm myself down, anytime I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed. I feel like by just breathing, being more mindful over your thoughts has really helped center myself a lot more. And I feel like it's just such an easy habit to incorporate. Anytime I may be feeling overwhelmed, just taking a few moments just to close my eyes, focus on my breath really has taken me a long way. And I feel like it's such an easy habit also for students to incorporate as, meditation doesn't have to be something super complex or mystical, but it really does start with, focusing on your thoughts, starting off with deep breaths, etc. And I feel like it's just such an easy habit to incorporate in your life. So that's definitely a really healthy habit for me. And also, as I mentioned, I feel like just reaching out and relying on the support network and system I have around me, whether that's my friends, my family, some of my mentors I've connected with, etc. Because a lot of the time, as I mentioned, I did do like to do things very independently, but I've had to realize that there are other people out there who may have more experiences as me or have different perspectives who may help me out even further. So just taking some time out of my day to, ask for help, go up to them, ask for advice, really has helped me a lot because it really made me realize that I'm not going through this alone and that I have so many other people I can rely on. So I feel like being very reliant on others and reaching out to others has been also a really healthy habit that I've been trying to grow and use very intentionally.
Thank you. I think it's really important to know that you're not like the only one advocating for a certain thing. So the next question is more about like success. How has your definition of success changed from being in high school to now being in college?
I feel like in high school, our success was very tied to specific outcomes or achievements or adult approval by either your teachers or your classmates. As the system of school, it's like you were most successful based on like how good you do on a test or, what your grades are like, what awards or accomplishments or extracurriculars you have. But now in college and kind of having more experience now graduating from high school. I feel like success for me is more about kind of my growth and my learning experience. For me, I feel like I would consider myself quote unquote successful, if I'm learning, if I'm staying curious and I'm making important choices that reflect my own values. And I feel like being in college and being surrounded by so many diverse individuals who have so many unique backgrounds and perspectives and paths to college made me realize that success isn't just one particular linear path or trajectory or one specific timeline, but it's really something that you constantly define and redefine over time. And it's just really empowering and exciting to see how so many students come from so many different backgrounds and are each successful in their own ways. And for me, I just want to constantly remind myself that, I feel the most successful and accomplished when I know that I'm learning something valuable and when I'm making a difference in my own community and I'm making a change that, I feel proud about.
The next question that we have for you is about sort of like how advocacy helped you. And the question is, what skills did advocacy teach you? Maybe public speaking, organizing, or negotiating that you now use in your college and expect to use in your career?
I feel like advocacy has really taught me very important communication skills because oftentimes what I've learned through my advocacy work, especially when reaching out to different nonprofits and organizations, leading workshops to students, pitching safe space to other individuals, it really taught me the importance of how to tailor my communication based on my specific audience. Because oftentimes, well, it's important that you're communicating for something that's very meaningful and important, and it's really important that you highlight that in your communication. It's also really important for you to recognize, what's in it for my audience and keep that at the forefront of your communication so you're able to tailor the way you approach something and pitch something in a way that's your audience will be most receptive of. Like, for instance, I won't be talking the same way as I am to students at a health classroom versus different advocates at a nonprofit. So I guess learning how to tailor my communication based on my audience is a really important skill that I even continue today at college, based on who I'm talking to, whether that's my professors or my classmates or different club organizations, etc. It's just really important for you to recognize, what your audience cares most about, and how you can tailor your communication to make them to be more interested, to make them more interested in what you're talking about. I've also really learned the importance of, staying calm, even though there's lots of external pressures or during difficult conversations. And I really learned, how to work with individuals who may not always agree with me. And I feel like these skills are, they really show up everywhere, whether that's group projects or leadership roles. And I feel like these are important soft skills that, are very important no matter what path you do choose to pursue. I'm doing business, but I'm sure students across all different majors and disciplines. It's really important for them to have strong communication skills, teamwork, collaboration, etc. And I feel like I'm really grateful that I was able to learn and practice these skills so early on. And these are definitely skills that I'm still learning and still growing and kind of learning how to implement most successfully in various aspects of my life. So I'm just really grateful that I've been able to kind of get a head start in my high school.
Thank you. I think you've shown us that even like through advocacy, you can gain a lot of other important skills in life. So now kind of coming back to your story and experience, if something like this, if something unsafe or really deeply wrong happens at school, what is the single most important thing that a student should do in that moment?
I think the most important thing that students should do is definitely not to go through it alone. Because oftentimes I feel like a lot of students, they compartmentalize like a lot of the issues they go through because again, I feel like when you're in high school at such a young age, you're worried a lot about how others may perceive you. So you're afraid that if you do speak up about these things, that, your classmates may judge you, or there's so much stigma, or they may feel weirded out or uncomfortable. So it's really important that you don't, bottle up all of these feelings. Reach out to someone you trust. It doesn't have to be a huge protest. Just reach out either to a classmate or a teacher or a counselor, a family member, or someone who you feel comfortable talking to. And, just reach out to them, even if you don't know necessarily what to do next. And I feel like sharing what's happened with you and your own personal emotions and experiences can help you feel a lot more less isolated and open up lots of different options. They can provide you with new perspectives or solutions, etc. So I think always the first important step is to not go through this alone, to reach out to someone you trust and to realize that you don't necessarily need a plan to ask for support. And oftentimes, when you do that initial reaching out to someone, then I feel like you're able to be able to put your issues and experiences into another perspective, and you can have a clearer path for how to move forward best.
Thank you, Gauri. This is going to be the final question we have for you, and then we'll move on to chat questions. And so the question is, what is something that you understand now about the power of a student's voice, and how can that apply to the people listening?
I think now, looking back, that was 4 or 5 years ago. I had wished that I had known that my voice mattered, even though I felt unsure or inexperienced. Because oftentimes a lot of youth and people in general feel that, as young people, we don't necessarily have the authority to speak up or make change just because of how a lot of major decisions are made by people higher up in authority or with more experience or who are older in age, etc. So I think it's really important to realize that you don't need to be 100% confident or certain to speak up. Again, as I mentioned, the very important first step is to pay attention to what may feel wrong or what is already meaningful to you. And I feel like students, including myself, often underestimate the influence and power that their voice has. So it's just really important to understand that even small actions can add real impact. And it's really important to not let the fact that you are young deter you from making change that you may feel passionate about or feeling that needs to be implemented within your community.
Thank you. I think that's a really big takeaway. So now going on to the chat questions. The first question that we got is, could you tell me more about the factors that helped you get into college and how this experience helped?
Yeah, so I feel like for me, I've always really loved school. I've always really loved learning and growing. And I feel like for me, an important skill I learned through designing safe space in my advocacy work is really the importance of, talking to so many people from so many different backgrounds and perspectives and people from all different paths of life. And I feel like for me, especially in college, it's been really exciting because I'm being I'm constantly being surrounded with so many people from all across the world, from so many different unique backgrounds and life stories. And I think it's just really exciting because I feel like, as much as college and school is about like learning the different academic majors and subjects you're in, it's also more about, learning from the people you're surrounded with. So for me, I feel like that was one of my biggest motivator to continue going to college and doing school. It's because I want to continue having conversations with people across all different backgrounds because I feel like every day I'm learning something new from someone. So it's just been really exciting to being surrounded with so many different unique individuals with so many different backgrounds. So I think that's kind of the most exciting part about college for me.
The next question we have is, can you please share whether your safe space platform incorporates an educational component alongside its advocacy services?
Yes, it does. So it has lots of tools for users to use. There is the option to document abuse, report abuse. There's also the opportunity to connect to different local organizations if they would like to speak to someone one-on-one, etc. And then there's also resources and kind of a guide that kind of explains, different ways in which students can receive mental health support, in which they can support their friends, classmates, peers, etc. So there is a lot of educational resources embedded upon its advocacy services as well. So it really does support students, not only victims of certain crimes, but also people who are more willing, more interested and inclined to learn more about these experiences as well. So it definitely does embed both educational as well as advocacy services.
So the next question is also about your app. Can you share can you share your challenges while creating the app itself?
I think one of our biggest challenge was that because of the topic so sensitive, a lot of the times when we were first beta testing and building prototypes and then reaching out to different organizations to support us, I think a lot of the time the biggest concern was user privacy because, especially in our document abuse section, I guess a lot of organizations were a bit hesitant to support us because they were afraid that this would infringe upon user privacy, data, etc., because again, it's such a sensitive issue. So I guess we had to be more mindful about that. We had to kind of remove some of the resources, add some of them. What we did was we talked to a lot of these advocacy organizations and kind of received feedback directly from them about how we can make the app more user friendly and privacy oriented. So that's why, as I mentioned during my talk, we decide to kind of decoy the app as like a space game just to add the extra level of privacy and security for users. So it was just a continuous process. We had an initial idea and it's so much more different than how it is today because we've constantly been adapting it and, adjusting our app based on the feedback we received. So it was just a continuous process and it just really taught me the importance of constantly receiving feedback from those around you to, keep improving upon the work that you have.
The next question we have is sort of about that maintaining mental health thing again, and it's about meditation. And
Mhm.
one of our participants is curious about meditation, and they say that I would love to learn more about your meditation practice and how does someone get started.
So I'm a part of Self-Realization Fellowship, which is a worldwide meditation and spiritual organization. So I first began because my grandma and then my dad, they've also been doing it. So I've essentially kind of grown up doing meditation. But I became more serious about it and implementing it in my life when I was later in middle school and in high school. So I feel like meditation is such a powerful and easy habit to be able to continue be able to implement because there's so many different resources online, whether that's, YouTube guided meditation practices, which is really special, which is really great because, there's some 5 minute ones, 10 minute ones, an hour ones, etc. So it really does help people across like all different backgrounds and experiences. There are also so many different books online that can really, if you're more interested in learning about this teaching and this practice. But I would definitely just recommend a quick YouTube search, a quick Google search as well. And there are just so many different types of meditations to be able to begin with. So I think that's a really important first step.
The next question is more about like everyday problems. So, how can students learn to recognize these everyday problems as opportunities for creating meaningful change in their community?
I think it's just really important to kind of start off with your own environment and kind of what you're experiencing day to day because there's so many different issues going on around in our world. And, while it is, special and beneficial to try advocating for each and every one of them, I guess it's really important to recognize that, as young people or as just individuals, you don't necessarily have the resources and means to tackle every single issue given your capacity and bandwidth. So I guess it's really important to first look at your immediate surroundings and kind of, noticing if there are any issues that, may feel like there isn't necessarily a good solution for. So for me, I just took some time to reflect on the incident that happened in a theater department, and I decided to kind of bounce off of that. I started having these initial conversations, and that's when I realized that this issue and these experiences extend to much larger than this singular incident within our theater department. So I guess it's really just important to start off with your own immediate surroundings, kind of noticing what may feel a bit off within your own community, and then kind of having conversations that go on from there. Because I feel like if you start with an issue that or a problem from your own community, then I guess you have more motivation and you have, I guess, more immediate motivation to continue supporting your work as you scale.
The next question we have for you is how did you figure out the problem exists like at this large scale? And can you share tips on how to research the problem?
I think I figured out how large the extent of this problem was during the protests because, I thought this was first a singular incident within my theory department. My one friend, she was a victim of this crime. But then just seeing how many students decide to congregate for the protest, and then so many other students spoke up in front of the entire protest and students to share their own experiences, it really made me realize, unfortunately, how prevalent either assault or mental health issues are. And then again, when I started reaching out to LifeWire, Confined to Domestic Violence, Girl Up, etc., and seeing how many advocates there are and how many individuals these advocates are supporting, I guess it made me realize that this issue extended beyond that one incident within our theater department, and that made me more motivated to start and create that initial change with Safe Space.
Thank you for that response. The next question is when a student notices something unfair and parents or teachers disagree, saying that's how it is, what are some suggestions for the student to push back and learn?
I think it's really important because as students and including myself, I feel like when I started getting committed to actually doing something for this change, I was very ambitious and very motivated. So even though when schools were saying no, I was like, no, I'm very passionate about this. I will continue. But I think as young people, while it is important that you do have that initial ambition and motivation, it's also important to recognize that oftentimes adults and authorities may be saying no to what you're trying to advocate for, maybe because they have prior experience or they have some prior knowledge that you may not know. So it is really important to understand, where parents and teachers are coming from and kind of understanding, why are they being so resistant? Because oftentimes they may have prior experiences that you just may not be fully aware of. But at the same time, it's also important to realize that just because they are saying no, it's important that that doesn't completely dismiss or deter your initial motivation as well. Because for me, it's when we started reaching out to schools, a lot of them, they were, unwilling to support us. So we decided to be more creative. So I went out of my way to reach out to different advocacy and domestic violence based organizations instead. And of course, they are more receptive. So I guess in this instant, it's really important to find a good balance between understanding, where are these teachers and parents coming from? Why are they being so hesitant to support you? But also understanding that just because they're not supportive of you doesn't mean that's a hard no, and finding creative ways to work around that as well.
I remember earlier in the talk, you talked about how one of the mistakes you made was at first trying to go about it alone, and that having a partner really helped you. But what if you can't get somebody else to help you and standing up for what's right means standing alone? How can a student manage that emotionally and physically?
I think that's definitely it can be very challenging, but oftentimes the unfortunate reality of a lot of student advocates because, this is a very stigmatized issue. A lot of students, even though they may support you, they may not want to do so outright. But I think what's really important is just having your initial goal as your main motivator. Because for me, in the beginning, I was doing a lot of things by myself. And even though a lot of individuals and teachers and peers, were not the most supportive of me. I guess for me, just constantly going back to my initial goal in mind helped to motivate me because, at the end of the day, kept doing this because I wanted to support my friend and my castmate. So even though I was doing a lot of things initially alone. I think I was kind of doing it in the sense to support the people who matter most to me. So I guess just having that constant goal in your mind as an important motivator really did help me a lot. And, you know, I feel like you don't need a whole group of people to support you. Just having one person, for me, it was that friend who helped me create safe space and the adult mentors I found. So it's just really important to realize that even these one connections that you have can take you a long way. And, just having your initial goal in mind to constantly motivate you, even though other people may not support you, has been really powerful for me.
You mentioned working with organizations. So, what are some good organizations that we could donate to that support victims of abuse?
I think off the top of my head, definitely these are like Washington-based ones. There is LifeWire. There is Confronting Domestic Violence, which I think is more national. Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. There's Girl Up. And there are a lot more. I can't think about the top of my head, but I think yes, those are the ones I've been working a lot, very closely with. Also, I'm sure that you can Google search as well and find specific organizations which are advocating for causes that you may feel more interested and passionate about. So I definitely recommend Google searching different organizations, kind of seeing the different things that they're advocating for, and definitely seeing ways in which you can support as well.
One more question for you is when you talked about continuing to support your app Safe Space in college, what specific forms of abuse does the app aim to address, and have you expanded it to forms other than sexual assault?
I think for me now, I'm kind of expanding it more into youth mental health because oftentimes mental health is a result of so many different issues that students encounter. So there is a mental health specific resource and guide provided by the app. For instance, students have the opportunity to, journal their thoughts and emotions, practice mindfulness and breathing exercises, connect with one another, etc. So we have incorporated a lot of mental health specific resources as well to support individuals.
Thank you so much, Gary. I think that is the last question for today. So, thank you so much, Gary, for sharing your story and experiences with all of us today. I had a few key takeaways from your talk. The first one being that advocacy starts with speaking up, even when it's uncomfortable and it can be intimidating. Another one that I had was you don't need a title or an age or a certain position to start creating change. Like, all that matters is having that initiative and persistence, and it matters more. Another one that I had was that taking care of your mental health is just as important as showing up for others. And I think the last one was that the skills you build through advocacy, like communication and leadership, also transfer directly into academics and future careers. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and encouraging students to use their voices with confidence and purpose. I think that brings our session to a close, and we truly hope you leave today feeling inspired and equipped with new valuable knowledge on advocacy skills. So, more about Peer Up. We want to know what you'd like to learn next. So, on our website, you can send us suggestions for future session topics and for details on upcoming talks and to access recordings and more. Make sure to visit our website at peer-up.org. And if you really enjoyed today, please share Peer Up with your friends to keep the community growing. Um, if anyone has any follow-up questions for the team, you can always reach out on the website. And thank you, Gauri, for making this a great session.
Thank you guys so much for having me and for giving me the opportunity to share my story as well. And thank you guys all so much for listening as well.